Well, welcome everyone back. Today, I'm really excited to have some speakers here to talk to you about what life is like as a lawyer working in public interest. So what I'll do is I'll just start with giving each speaker a chance to talk a little bit introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what their jobs are like, what's good and what's bad, and how they got there. And then we'll have some questions. So Abby, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I forgot to ask this. Can you all hear me okay, even though I'm a little ways away? Okay. There's this sunlight right here that if I lean forward, I'll be right in it. So, well, it's really nice to be here. Thank you, Scott, for inviting me, and thanks everyone in advance for listening to us and asking us the questions you have. I'm really looking forward to it. I graduated, I'm Abby Sullivan Engen. My pronouns are she, her. I went to Hastings and graduated in 2009. And I am a managing attorney in the immigrants' rights practice at Centro de la Raza in Oakland, which for those of you, it might be a little confusing because there's another organization in San Francisco with a very similar name, but it's a separate org, not our office. So yeah, I knew I wanted to do public interest law. I didn't necessarily know I wanted to do immigration when I started law school, but I had been out of college for a little bit longer than kind of a lot of my classmates. I had a 6-year gap between college and law school where I worked with immigrant populations, and I just knew I wanted to work with immigrant populations, and I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. So at Hastings, I was in HPILF. I did the public interest concentration, which I think still exists. And then I also, I did a clinic with he still does, Ascanio Piamelli's clinic on group advocacy and systemic reform. And so those all were really great experiences. My first job out of law school was clerking for a federal judge. And I had a really, I'm realizing now just how unique of an experience it was. The judge I worked with was a former public defender. She, threw her name in the hat to become a federal judge when her brother went to federal prison. So she had a really different kind of perspective than a lot of the people on the federal bench as to why she was there and why she, what being a judge could mean for her. And criminal cases were much more important. I don't want to say important. She felt that judges did not put adequate time and resources into criminal cases where people's liberty was at stake. So she kind of structured her law clerk support differently, and I worked almost exclusively on criminal cases. And this was in a border state, so there were a lot, an appalling number, I have to say, of cases in federal criminal proceedings that were immigration offenses. So not to get too in the weeds, but immigration law is both civil and criminal. The criminal immigration offenses that you see in federal court are typically for illegal re-entry following deportation. And most of the people that would appear before her were, like escaping very violent situations. And that was why they felt like they needed to re-enter, even though they had been previously deported. Or they were people who had lived in the US since they were young kids, had gotten caught up in something, some sort of arrest or criminal conviction and had been deported, and then they were deported to a country they didn't know. So they came back. So I kind of saw like how unfair that was, that people were penalized by being forced to live in a country that either they weren't safe or that really wasn't their native country by any, real understanding. And then they were essentially triply punished because they went to federal prison before they were deported. And then their federal prison sentence depended on the severity of whatever that prior criminal offense was for which they had already served their punishment. So it felt, we had people who any other judge would have sentenced them to 4, 5, 6 years in prison based on having had a prior conviction for something that they had already been punished for. So it just really got me more passionate about immigration law, even though I was pretty intimidated by it because I didn't take the class in law school on immigration law. And I had a couple other jobs, and then when I moved back to the Bay Area, I started working first for a small private immigration law firm that does mostly removal defense, deportation defense, as well as like family-based cases. And I worked there for about a year and a half before coming to the nonprofit where I am now. So Centro, where I've been for about 3.5 years. So that's kind of my gist. I think I've covered everything, but look forward to hearing more questions at the end. And I think we can go on to the next person.
Great, thank you. Juliana.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julianna Fredman. I'm a senior attorney in the Consumer Law Unit at Bay Area Legal Aid. And I was kind of laughing when Abby was talking because a lot of stuff is very similar. I also had a very long gap between college and law school. And I also knew I wanted to do public interest law when I went to law school at Hastings, but wasn't real clear on what I wanted to do. And I did the individual rep clinic and the mediation clinic. And I hadn't really figured out, even when I was graduating, I had a second child while I was in law school, and my last semester was externing for a federal judge. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I didn't have a job lined up. And my clerkship supervisor for my 1L summer from Bay Area Legal Aid called me up and said, "Oh, hey, I need you for this contract position." I was like, okay. So I went and did this contract position doing public benefits law in San Francisco at Bay Area Legal Aid. And while I was there, I met Claire Johnson-Raba, who had started she was a year ahead of me at Hastings. I graduated in 2011. And she had a fellowship to start a consumer unit at Bay Legal. And she was the consumer unit, and she was kind of like trying to make it work. And she was like, "You should come work with me." So I did, and we got me some funding, and I became one of 3 people in the consumer unit for quite a long time. And now we are, I think, we're 6. So Bay Area Legal Aid is the largest provider of civil legal services in the Bay Area, and we have 7 offices in 7 counties. And I just, I kind of fell into it, but I really love this practice because it's very, very broad. And so it's very fluid. So we do a lot of debt collection defense. That was definitely there are just so many people who are caught up in the civil legal system who just don't even know what they're looking at. And so it's really wonderful to be able to help people navigate it and get some kind of ownership and power back over what's going on and not have things just done to them. But we also were able to affirmatively litigate. We do things from bail bond debt to credit reporting that's keeping tenants out of low-income housing to FOIA disputes with the Department of Education, a lot of student loan issues. And so we've really been able to I've really been able to build my own practice, kind of doing the things as I find them interesting. So that's how I ended up where I am. And I've only worked in one place my whole career, but it's actually felt like a bunch of different careers, and I really love it.
Great, thank you very much. Elise. Oh, Elise, you're on mute.
Okay. Oh, there we are. Thank you for inviting me, Scott. I look forward to this opportunity to talk about what I do. I am a 1986 graduate from Hastings, and I am currently the general counsel for the ACLU of Northern California. The ACLU consists of 2 corporations, a nonprofit C4 and a public policy, C3 and a public policy C4. So how did I get there? I actually was exposed to governance of public bodies when I was in the first summer after my first year of law school. I had an opportunity to do a little work for a firm that represented a couple of cities and corporations. And that's when I kind of got bit by the bug. Coming out of law school, I went into private practice with a law firm that specialized in contract services for public agencies and developers and corporations. And I kind of cut my teeth on public law in a private way, so to speak. Sat at a number of city council, board of supervisors, school board meetings, and water districts, mosquito abatement districts. There's also I did, right out of law school, I had my first trial with code enforcement regarding barking dogs. So it's an opportunity to have learned how to be a general counsel from the ground up, so to speak. And in 2004, well, prior to 2004, I actually was in 3 law firms. The first as an associate, and the next 2 as partner. And then I went in-house as general counsel for UC Hastings. I retired from UC Hastings in 2018 and was recruited by ACLU of Northern California to be their first general counsel. You know, the general counsel's role is not only legal advisor, but it's kind of business advisor, as well as providing the human touch so that the people that you counsel listen to you. I advise executive officers, individual employees as applicable. I do a lot of work with HR. Also, there are, as I said, there are two corporations, so there's 2 boards of directors, and I advise the boards and sit at all the board meetings. The general counsel role, I like it. I like it a lot, obviously, because I'm still doing it. And I think that the perspective is legal advisor, but also to just really look at the operation as a whole. ACLU does impact litigation. It doesn't like represent clients such as, you know, legal aid does, for example. And my involvement in that oftentimes has to do with advising on partnership agreements with co-counsel, settlement agreements. Also, I get involved with conflict of interest resolutions. Furthermore, with the C4 side of the corporation, there's campaign financing and FPPC regulations, and I advise on that. And it's just, it's what I like to call, in a lot of respects, a specialist at being a generalist. You know, you issue spot enough to know when you need to get special counsel on something. For example, recently we had ethics issue regarding who the corporation could actually represent in a piece of litigation. And I mean, that thing started, it was a loop, and it just started going and going and going. And so it was incumbent upon me to bring in a legal expert on attorney ethics issues. What's good about the job is it's all encompassing. It's very unpredictable. I mean, you never have the same situation every day. And what's not so good, but actually good, it's very unpredictable. I mean, you know, even as general counsel at Hastings, you never knew. You had no idea what was gonna happen from day to day. You know, we might have a bomb threat one day. The next day, we might have, you know, Title IX issues come up where there has to be some involvement in the sexual harassment of students. So I like it. I like it's unpredictable. I never know what is going to happen from one day to the next. It's very hard to plan your calendar. I started my day this morning at 8 o'clock, And I've had like 2 additional requests to try to find some time on my calendar to deal with an HR issue. I gotta say, HR issues are huge. They're huge. And I like it. It's fun. And I think it is a perfect opportunity for someone who likes a variety of work and who has some business acumen to understand the breadth of some of the operational issues that the organization deals with.
Great. Well, that was excellent. I'm going to follow up with a few questions. And one of my first question is, different lawyers in different careers can identify different sources of job satisfaction. And like if you're a civil litigator for a big firm, like you just might like the win or the money or the prestige that comes with that. What is it about public interest litigation that contributes to your job satisfaction? And what's challenging about that particular aspect, the public interest nature of the work? Maybe we'll start with Elise on this one.
Well, you're asking me what gives me a charge. What gives me a charge is when I identify a problem and the solution that no one even saw. They didn't even see it coming, and they basically will get run over by the train unless somebody saw this and started dealing with it. I'm like, hold it. And yeah, I think that's really, really good. And also there's certain aspects of the practice areas that I really, really like. And when I get involved in it, I get this really sinister kind of smile. And my executive team goes, oh God, oh no, there she goes again. I'm like, yeah, let me at it. I really like that. So I'd say, once again, it's just the unpredictability and the ability to shine. I had a mentor when I first started practicing who represented public agencies. And I recall one day he returned to the office from a late night, 3 a.m. in the morning, city council meeting. And he said, every now and then you really get opportunity to show them what you do. And so I guess I can sum up my comments with, I love those opportunities to show them, my value, what I really do.
Thank you. Abby, what about you? What's the satisfaction that you get? And then also what's sort of challenging about working for a public interest organization?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start by saying, my experience really is in immigration law as far as working in a public interest organization. I think every office is going to be really different, and I don't think that we can lump public interest experiences into one, because so much of what, I guess, responding to something Elise said, so much of what we're doing, and as managers at least, so this probably isn't as much the case for staff attorneys, but relates to office, to HR issues, interpersonal relationships, especially during this pandemic when things are just strained. So I think office culture is going to really impact your experience, and that's true whether you're a manager or a staff attorney. I guess for me, I'll just speak to what I think the primary challenges are, and then I'll talk about what's so awesome and why you all should come work at Centro Legal. So I think that, I don't know if you all have heard of the concept of movement lawyering, but it's kind of gained a little traction recently. And I think that I'm not an expert, so I hope I'm not, misrepresenting it, but that there's sort of a push towards acknowledging that we're working within a system that is at least in certain ways, a system that's rooted in oppression and capitalism and white supremacy, right? And so, like, when you work for a nonprofit, almost all of your money that allows you to do your work comes from either the government or rich people. And that it is hard to balance that with wanting to serve a population and work in collaboration with a population that is, also being oppressed by those very forces, if that makes sense. So I think that one of the challenges for me is kind of like looking at that balance, and people in this field have really different kind of philosophies on, I work with attorneys who are like, I am an immigration attorney. That is what I'm good at. I want to represent clients and get them legal status in the US. I work with other attorneys who are like, of course, that's what I want to do, but I also want to dismantle systems. And I want us to be focusing on dismantling oppressive systems. And so unfortunately, those two things can be in tension, right? Especially when like we get a lot of our funding from the government. I guess we're fortunate in California that the Department of Social Services funds immigration legal services. And I'm sure like Juliana at Bay Area Legal Aid, a huge amount of your funding is from the federal government. So that's kind of a big picture challenge, is just that sort of tension that you're working within. And that, relatedly, there's never enough funding. There's never enough resources to meet the need that the community has. And so what I find really can be heart-wrenching is having to just turn away the vast majority of clients who really need a lawyer. We at Centro, I work specifically with families and unaccompanied minors who are in deportation proceedings. And the stats are really remarkable about kind of the likelihood of winning protection from deportation if you do or don't have a lawyer in immigration court. Immigration law is known as one of the most difficult, complicated areas of the law of federal law. So it's pretty impossible, even with a pretty straightforward case, for somebody to navigate immigration court without a lawyer. But at the same time, my office has partnerships with local school districts. I'm in regular contact with the newcomer support services specialists at Oakland Unified School District. And they have told me recently that every month they're enrolling around 30 new unaccompanied minors and about that many children who came to the US recently with their parents. So these are all people that need a lawyer. And even if we had, even if we were hiring a lawyer every month, we couldn't meet that need. So I think that is something that's really challenging. And that we're not paid the same way that people in the private sector are paid. So it's like, whereas maybe some people might be able to say like, oh, I'm going to get an au pair so that I don't have to deal with picking up my kids from school, or, oh, we're just going to order, prepared meals 3 nights a week. Like usually that's just not something that's an option for those of us in public interest. So it's just hard. It's just it's just your life feels like there's just so much and you can't do all of it. But at the same time, for me, having meaning in the work is, I definitely could not be a lawyer if I didn't feel like really passionate about the work I do. The hours are not as bad as private firm hours, at least in my case, but we work a lot. We definitely work more than 40 hours a week. I have 2 little kids, so it's, sometimes I do feel like I don't get to see them as much as I would like to. But it is such a gratifying experience. And for me, I think I come from a relatively privileged background. And like the reason why I speak Spanish fluently is because I had opportunities to go travel in Latin America and learn Spanish fluently. And it just doesn't, it feels to me like it wouldn't feel right to me to have like used my privilege to get the law degree that I got and have the tools that I have, and then not try to apply that in a way that is going to, at least in some small way, level the playing field a little bit. So I get a lot of gratification from winning cases for clients, but also just from like partnering with a client through what is unfortunately a really grueling process, and just being able to be there for them. Even, in San Francisco, we have really friendly immigration judges, so I haven't really lost cases, which like I should knock on some wood right now. But when we do lose cases, it's still, the client still feels incredibly grateful that they had an attorney navigating this very difficult process with them. So that for me is kind of the fuel that keeps me going.
Thank you. Juliana.
So, I mean, I think anyone who does direct services legal work has to get a lot of their charge out of working with people. I mean, you know, I think that's just sort of a given. And that's definitely the case for me. Like, I like to work with clients. I like to help them, you know, I like to talk to them. I like to help figure out what their legal issue is. I like to help them understand what's going on, again, even if, you know, win or lose. And, you know, I think some of that same tension in terms of what Abby talked about having to turn people away. One way we sort of try to deal with that is we conduct weekly clinics, which are not necessarily, which are informational clinics, but also assist people through the civil litigation process. And, you know, for people that we can't help, a lot of times that can help them make their way through and get much better outcomes, specifically, especially with like debt collection lawsuits, than they would have if they were trying to just figure it out all by themselves. But yes, my organization is funded in part, it's a legal services corporation funded organization, which means it's congressionally funded. And that's not all our funding, but that funding comes with really specific restrictions, which can be quite frustrating. The primary ones, one is that we can only serve people with certain types of immigration status, so US citizens and certain types of legal status. You know, and we're fortunate in the Bay Area to have a pretty robust public interest communities. So there you can have, you know, if you know your community partners, you may be able to find people referrals if they don't qualify for your services, which I don't think is the case everywhere. Another restriction we have is that we are not allowed to be involved in class action lawsuits. And in, you know, so in California, in consumer law, we have some interesting tools. The consumer protection laws have a public injunction component that individuals can bring a lawsuit and ask for a public injunction to stop the bad actor from continuing this conduct. But, you know, there are certainly cases where it's going to be in the best interest of the people affected to have class relief. And that can be hard because we see all the people and we see the patterns. You know, one sort of way we look, at least I try to look at things, is that, you know, because everybody wants to have impact, right? Like you know, you I think Abby articulated better, but like, you know, you talk to people, and it's great to be able to help someone through their individual issue, but you also want to be able to impact things more broadly. And I think, you know, how I see a legal services role, a direct services role, is really you can identify and you can test issues. So you can bring that that lawsuit on behalf of that individual, and you can get a decision, you know, and you can test the law, right? Whereas, you know, and they don't necessarily see you coming. So that's something I also enjoy and get a lot of charge off of. If, you know, if you're like, if they say legal aid is representing against a bank or a credit reporting agency, they're kind of like, eh. And they don't really expect you to dive in and like beat them. But we do, you know, rather often. And so that can be really exhilarating. You know, talked about it in the big firm, but it's exhilarating to, you know, to be able to come up against kind of a big hitter and win. And then you know, then the class action attorney might take notice of that issue. And we've had this happen time and time again, right? Where you're like, hey, did you see this case over here? They just determined that this kind of debt is covered by this law. And then the class action attorney is like, oh, you know, like they might take up that case. Not the same case, obviously, but like suddenly the issue's on the map. So it's something you have to kind of like condition yourself for, because you know, it'd be really nice to be able to go out there and like get that relief yourself. And as a legal services corporation lawyer, you can't. So you have to figure out what your role is in like attacking systems when you, like, one of the big tools in the consumer law systemic change is a class action lawsuit. You don't have that, right? So you have to like look at like, how do I develop kind of legal issues and maybe, you know, put them on the map so that somebody else can come in and like get a broad-based injunction, for example. And what else was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably, what is our other big restriction, which is not such a huge issue in California. We're not allowed to participate in like legislative advocacy or lobbying unless we have a specific invite from a lawmaker asking us for our opinion. In California, we get more of those invites than we can actually have time to respond to, because we have a pretty active legislature, and we have had over the last few years a lot of legislatures interested in increasing consumer protections in the state, and so we get asked our opinion a lot. So, you know, and asked to participate in that process a lot. So, you know, it is there are these like frustrations that you run into, and those three primary restrictions can be incredibly frustrating at times, but at the same time, there are ways to kind of work through them, and it can be tremendously gratifying to get a result that is good for your client, and that also, you know, might actually be used to make broader change.
Thank you. That was great. Just one more question, and then I'll open it up. I'm curious about, and we've already alluded to it a bit, but I'm curious about how far beyond you know, individual clients' activism at your respective organizations can go, and in what kind of forms those take. And so maybe Juliana, I'll start with you. Do you do any like community outreach or any kind of programs that are educational rather than just direct legal services?
Yeah, well, our clinics, I mean, they've changed somewhat with COVID, and we're still kind of reworking, but our clinics, we used to have like 10 clinics a month in different counties, and they always started with like a 40-minute know your consumer, or half hour, depending on who's doing it, know your consumer rights educational piece. So like, this is how a debt collector can collect, this is what they can't do, here's the law, here's your rights in terms of credit reporting, you know, here's the kind of money that can be collected, here's what can't. And people really like those. And we're in the process of trying to convert some of them into videos or something, because, you know, even though we will go back to in-person clinics probably pretty soon, we're not going to be able to have like all those people in a room together. We're going to have to stagger things more. So having the big, broad educational component isn't going to be an option. We also like train community partners. So we do a lot of training, and like in San Francisco, we do the balance. There's credit counselors, and like for our purposes, credit counselors, and the Spark Point centers that are run by United Way, they run free credit counseling. The credit counselors are kind of a first line where people in the community might come to a free credit counseling agency and be trying to figure out what's going on, or like, you know, how to deal with their student loans, or how to deal with this or that. And so we train the credit counselors to issue spot and know when they should send someone over to us. And then, you know, we like, you know, and beyond that, in terms of advocacy, you know, again, we can participate in things with an invite, and we get them a lot. So like, a couple of years ago, I went to Washington, D.C. for the Department of Education negotiated rulemaking on student loan rules, for example. And it's like a 3-month process to help write the regulations on certain student loan laws. Of course, those are all overturned, and they're redoing it now. Every administration, they're doing them again these days. So yeah, we do a lot of outreach, a ton.
Elise, I know the ACLU is quite different. Can you give us a couple of examples about, you know, what kind of partnerships the ACLU has that are where maybe litigation is an adjunct to a larger initiative? Oh, you're on mute again.
Sorry about that. Sure, I can. I think first off, I'll tell you that in California, there are 3 ACLUs. It is the San Diego and Imperial Counties, Los Angeles, and Northern California. And last year, actually it opened this year, we completed a project with all 3 affiliates that created a separate corporation called California Action that is now located in Sacramento, and its function is legislative advocacy. And so we look at legislation, we propose legislation The California action is a C4 that can engage in political activities, as is one of our corporations. And for example, we did get very involved in the recall election of Gavin Newsom. We put money in that. We put money in the district attorney races, et cetera. And we also partner with community organizations on various things, and we provide grants. I mean, the ACLU does not take public funds. It is funded by donations and membership dues. And so we have a broad range of opportunities to be involved in various issues that that we might support a community partner in. We provide grants, and it's kind of, that's a really substantial role. Currently, we are working with the Native tribes in Northern California, where we provided grants for student education and bringing in instructors and school administrators in order to advance the right of Native Americans to an equal education. And so we have a really broad range. So how these areas are chosen, the board has two committees. It's a legal committee and the CPAC committee, which is California Equal Protection Act. And so the board members decide what areas that they want to include as part of the strategic vision for. We do it like every 3 years. And I'm happy to report that Nancy Stewart, former, what was she? She was the assistant dean, or she has now accepted a position on our board, which is very, very exciting. And so if there are programs that address reproductive rights, criminal justice rights, race relations, immigration rights, voting rights, all of that. And if we do partner with community-based organizations, and oftentimes we provide them with skills. I mean, I've talked to community-based organizations about FPPC regulations and grants in order to assist them with their work.
Thank you, Elise. Abby, I'll turn it over to you. What kind of community outreach or other kinds of partnerships do you engage in to facilitate the activism behind individual representation?
Yeah, I could probably talk for an hour about it, and I won't. We do a lot, and different people. I mean, one thing that we're committed to and at Centro is like really trying to provide opportunities for staff members who are interested in activism and collaborating with other community organizations. Whereas, as I mentioned before, some people aren't as passionate about that and just want to like work on the cases and, file the applications and go to court and win legal status for our clients. So recently we have collaborated with other nonprofits around the treatment of Haitian immigrants at the border, as well as Afghanis, trying to just get as many people on board with working on humanitarian parole applications for people in Afghanistan. And that's been, it's a difficult circumstances to be witnessing, but it's been a really amazing and inspiring response with people who already have really full plates, just saying like, yes, I want to get involved. And a few different local nonprofits have partnered to create this kind of separate collaborative that does raises money for the fees for the humanitarian parole applications for Afghans, as well as files applications. So that's more of an example of like inter-organizational collaboration, where there's a lot of collaboratives with people who work with orgs who work on unaccompanied minor immigration issues that we, are trying to identify, like just everybody acknowledging that the need so outpaces our ability to meet the need. And so how can we kind of streamline and work collaboratively to address these challenges. Also during the pandemic, not the immigration team, but at Centro Legal, we have a tenants' rights team that got funding, well, that was basically selected by the state and the county of Alameda to administer federal recovery funding for purposes of keeping people housed. So that has been amazing. We have, that it's now anybody in Alameda County, and I think Contra Costa County actually as well, that we are the organization who receives requests for housing assistance through the federal recovery funds, which is, not legal services. We have this whole team of people who are kind of long-term but temporary staff working on that initiative. And then within immigrants' rights, I think that just there's a lot of listservs, there's a lot of opportunities for making comments on proposed rulemaking. I think one thing we're seeing with the Biden administration is that although it is slow, and for those of you who've taken admin law, like there's a lot of hoops to jump through, but there is a push to really change some of the policies that the Trump administration both tried to put in place, but didn't do it right. I guess, which is a good thing, and also the policies that the Trump administration did succeed in putting in place that are really prejudicial. So, so there's efforts around like proposed rulemaking. There's a lot of advocacy going on right now around work authorization for asylum applicants. The applications are taking like a year to approve, which is just absurd. Like people need to be able to work in order to live here while they wait for their asylum case to be heard. And then finally, just briefly, what I mentioned before, the team that I work with partners with 2 school districts to do Know Your Rights presentations around immigration law, just acknowledging that we can't take even really a significant percentage of the people who need lawyers. So we at least try to, work with the school district partners to get that information to recently arrived students and families in a digestible way. So that's kind of like some examples, but I think just there are, in public interest law in the Bay Area, the opportunities are pretty endless as far as like engaging in activism and collaboration. It's just a question of what individuals have capacity to take on.
Well, thank you all 3 of you for all of that.